Hi everyone, Ronnie Rowe here, back again for another week of Ronnie Rowe Designs to talking about various things, cross stitch specifically, some charts, some old charts, some new things, what's in the works right now with me, um, what hopefully is coming out very soon, and a little history of how I got started with all of this. But first, uh, again, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to my channel. I've got some really nice responses this week. I've tried to answer everyone's questions the best I can. I did have some phone calls with questions this week about how my charts are laid out, and so I'm going to get into that in a very short time here. But first of all, where we were last week, I was stitching Snowbound. That is the boat with the sky in the back that I told you that originally it started out as a black and white, but after I got going, I decided to make it color. Right now, I've been stitching this week, and where I am on Snowbound is, let's see, you can tell I'm almost done. I've got a little bit on the right hand side to do. The bottom right hand portion of this to finish up the boat and put a little bit more blue water in there, if you will, icy blue water. And I'll have it all completed. I'm planning on having this thing completed this week sometime or early next week. And what I'm planning on doing is taking this piece of material, and I'm going to attempt to do a video of showing you what I go through, washing it, iron it, and getting it ready for framing. And I'll be buying a frame next week, I guess. I'll call in and order a metal frame. I am going to put this in a metal frame. So that's where we are on this project. And I'm going to walk you through and show you what I do on that. And the next projects will be at least 2 or 3 weeks, a couple of weeks away right now. I've been working on it, and that's the one you recall, the little house here. I'm still trying to figure on the light coming down, the sunlight. I'm working a lot with that right now and trying to get all that straight. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, I'll be cutting material. And again, I'm going to sit down, and before I put the first cut on the material, I'm going to show you how I cut the material and how I figure out sizes for this. So that's to come in the weeks ahead. But what I wanted to do right now is I showed you a picture of a little owl I did. And somebody asked me, that was my first attempt at cross stitch, that little owl. And people ask me, well, what did you do after that? Well, after the little owl, I told my wife to go down to the craft store, and this was a very small project. And so I told her to go down to the craft store and get me something larger, get me a bigger project, because all it was just stitching, and how many stitches could you make? But I wanted something other than an owl. I wanted something a little bit more challenging, if you will, and when I framed it up, might be better than an owl. Well, she went into the local craft store and bought me a book by Judith Sandy. Judith Sandy was a lady back in the 70s and 80s that had a book out called Timeless Designs. And I think if you go on the internet right now, you can still find Timeless Designs if you type that in. Remarkable lady. Of everything I saw in cross stitch, she was the one I saw that was really giving some depth and giving some perspective, if you will, to her art and cross stitch. And that really intrigued me, I guess. And so I bought the book. I did. I started stitching many of her designs in the book, and I still have them today that I had stitched. Didn't even consider myself doing any design work. So I took the book and made the designs. And at the time, I was working at NASA. I had a friend of mine who was making frames that was selling to I'm not sure where he was selling. He was going to Charlotte, but he was making frames and selling them to cross stitch or any other type of people. These were little square frames, um, look like little logs, if you will. And he was mass producing these things. And so he decided he'd make some frames for me for the ones I had cross stitched out of Judith Sandy's book. And we did that, and we framed them all up, and they looked nice. And so they're fine, they were okay. But what are you going to do with them? So he was making frames, and I was doing the cross stitch. And where we are locally in Hampton, Virginia, we had an annual fair day, and they were asking for participants to come to fair day to set up a booth and show their wares. It was a craft show. And Herb, which is the fellow's name, Herb and I decided to spend the $15, $25, whatever it was, and go down and set up a booth. And I had an A-frame. I made a little A-frame to put the pictures on. And decided to go down there that pretty Saturday afternoon and see what we could do. So we saw a lot of friends come by. And what happened, I actually sold some. People came by and looked at this cross stitch, and they all framed up with glass and everything, and they bought them. They bought some of these, and I thought, wow, that's cool, Now, of course, I put a lot of hours of stitching in it, so if you looked at it per hour, what you got, I mean, you're losing money. But that really wasn't the point. The point was you actually sold something that you had done. You actually framed it. You really didn't create it because you stitched from someone else's pattern. Well, that happened. And so after that, I stitched a few more from other people. And one of the people's books I did buy and stitch some out of was a lady who's still active in cross stitch today, Sue Hillis. And so I did those, and I kind of got tired of buying a book and sitting down there and doing someone else's. So I said, I'm going to try this myself. It's something I ought to be able to do. So at the time, my mother had an old farmhouse in an area close to us called Poquoson, Virginia. And anyway, I went in, I decided for my mother's birthday, what I'd do is I'd go down and take a picture. And of course, that time we didn't have any digital photography. You had to go get the roll of film and everything. So went down and got the film, went down and took a picture, and took several pictures of it, had them developed, and I blew them up to 8x10 or ever what size, I can't recall now. And what I did was take that picture and put a piece of plastic that I had made graft on. I'd run it through a printing machine and made squares on it, little squares. I didn't know what size it was going to turn out to be. And I took a pen with a light box. I put the picture on the light box and put the piece of film with grid on it on top of it. And I would sit there with a pen, and everything I saw a color, I'd sign a color to a symbol, and did all that handwork. And so my first picture that I ever did by myself that I designed was my mother's old farmhouse in Poquoson. And there it is, Poquoson Home Place, I called it. It was okay. The trees, they weren't anything special. What you saw right in here, this was a well that was out there, but I didn't do that very well at that. But this was my first attempt. And so anyway, that was the old Poquoson Home Place. And so I did that, and I decided, well, that turned out okay. It was all right. But I didn't even really plan on doing anything else. I just planned on, well, that's it for this. So, but anyway, I got the idea, and I don't even know where it came from, to go to Williamsburg and take some pictures of the buildings in Williamsburg. They had so many colonial buildings, like the Governor's Palace, Bruton Parish Church. They had a lot of taverns, Christina Campbell's Tavern, the Raleigh Tavern, Chewing's Tavern, and they had a lot of really, really old buildings, the Wren Building, which is on the campus of William and Mary, but a lot of historic buildings in historic Williamsburg, obviously. So I went up and took a bunch of pictures of those. And the guardhouse next to the Capitol. That was a building they used to store back in colonial times all of their armaments and powder um, in those times. So anyway, I started out and I said, well, I got to pick one I think I can do. So I decided I'm going to do one of the guardhouse. And and so I just went up there, took the picture, the same layout, put all my little symbols on. But this time I had to transfer it to something that I could get printed. I wanted to print this thing. I don't know why. I just wanted to print it because I guess I'd seen the book by Judith Sandy. I had seen Sue Hillis's book, and I decided, well, why can't Ronnie Rowe do that also? So I went through that whole process, which seemed like to me took a long, long time to do. And I made my first chart ever back in 1983. And I decided, well, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to copyright it. I found out how you do that, going to the Library of Congress, filling out the forms, sending them $10, blah, blah, and had that done. And so my first pattern that I ever made, and all black and white. This was no color involved with this. I had it printed. A friend of mine close to me ran a print shop, and I went in and gave him the what I had put on a piece of paper, and he printed them up on me. I think he printed 10, 15, 25, everything of the guardhouse. And this is, you can see at the bottom here. Let me see if I can get this thing where my fingers are. Right here. Yeah, 1983. Right there. So, but every symbol on this thing, it was hand drawn. I mean, all of these symbols are hand drawn on this thing for him to print. And the grid on there is a grid that I just put together. I'd gotten the grid off grid paper, and of course went through the DMC colors. As you can see, I gave that brief instructions of what to do. And that time I was doing some back stitching. So, and this is what I was producing: a piece of paper on this beige paper, black print on beige paper. And I printed a bunch of these. And I did this one, and I did several other ones. The music teacher's house, not the one I have out now in black and white, but an original old one. And so I had all of these. And so I decided, well, I got them. I'm going to take them up to Williamsburg. And so they had several shops up in Williamsburg. And one was called Nicholson White House. It was right there in the colonial area. It was a very small shop. And the people that owned it, I showed them the models and showed them what I had. And they bought them. They wanted to buy some of these patterns because they were selling cross stitch at the time, some color, some black and white. So they bought some of these, and then I had two other shops. One of them was a Haas Troll, which just went out of business, unfortunately, several years ago. It'd been in business a long time, and they took some. And then there was a place outside of Williamsburg, but very popular tourist place people like to go, and it was a soap and candle factory up near the pottery factory, and lady by the name of Sherry Barnett was running a place called Needlecraft Corner. And I went in there, and of course, and she bought some too. And I couldn't believe it. I'd been down there and got Billy Wood, my buddy, to print these up. And 15, 20, ever how many there were, very cheap. And I went to Williamsburg, and these people bought those. They bought my pattern. And I was astonished. It just, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe somebody was going to buy these. And so I went home. A week or so later, they called me up and they wanted more of them. They had sold them. And so that's what I started doing. I started doing those types on this piece of paper, and I was selling to Williamsburg. And that's really how I got started in the cross stitch business. And from there, the next thing that happened to me, and this went on for several years, I guess, 83, 82, 83, 84, about that time frame. And that was I had three shops that I was selling to, and they, of course, we're in Colonial Williamsburg, a lot of tourism, had new people come through all the time. So it was working very well for me. So that right there is how I really got started in cross stitch, and how it all came about for me. And 42, 43 years later, I'm still doing it. But anyway, my next video, I'm going to take it from there and show you how I got into the color booklets and what happened and what caused all of this. How did I go from this piece of paper to a color book leaflet? I call it a book. You see them in the stores all the time with the inside, outside. So anyway, we'll be doing that in next week, hopefully. And also hopefully be able to show you some of the taking the snowbound and how I'm going about and washing that and getting that all ready to frame up. So anyway, that's a preview of what I'm going to be doing next week. But anyway, somebody asked me, so I thought I would tell you how I got going with this. I got a call this week from a lady that had received one of my designs and was thoroughly frustrated by the 12 sheets I had in the design. She had bought the design baseball. It wasn't one of my new ones came out, and it had 12 sheets of instruction in it, and she was having a horrible time with trying to figure out how I was doing this and why I was doing it the way I do it. Well, years ago, I've put out some books that it's been hard to read. Some things have been hard, some are easier than others, but I've always put a note on my design to say permission is given to enlarge the design to help with the stitching process, which no one seemed to have a problem with. But last year, 2 years, 3 years ago, I decided instead of just putting 1 or 2 pieces of paper in the design, I was going to break it up into sheets. And I'm going to show you examples of one. This is As Time Flies, the individual sheets that are in the design when you purchase one. And what I have done is I've taken this design, this sheet, and across the top, and of course, this is your sheet of paper as it comes. And if you look down this side, turn the thing around. As you can tell, okay, I'll get it right there. You've got two numbers on this. You got down the right hand, you got down this side here and across the top. The numbers across the top are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the numbers down the bottom are 1 through 6. And so that is in the upper left-hand corner of the design. If you get sheet number 2 goes right after this. And if you see sheet number 2, you'll notice going from left to right, you still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down here. But now you pick up 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So obviously, this one goes right next to the sheet right here in the design. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I picked up the wrong one, but anyway, you get the point. Across the top, it's going to be 1 through 28 or 1 through 30, each sheet, and then down the side. And then when you go back the next row down from top to bottom on the sheet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the next sheet will be 7, 8, 9, 10. Starting at the top will be 1. So it's very easy to lay these sheets out. And the reason I did it this way was so it's larger for people to be able to stitch by. And that's the only time I've ever had anyone call or ask about that. But this way, there was a problem with that. But we got it all straight. And so I told her, I said, I wish her well. Baseball is all my stuff. It's not just one night of stitching. It takes a while to do. So, but anyway, that's the way I've decided to do it. All of my patterns, none of my patterns are applicable to Pattern Keeper. And the reason why that is because when I print, I don't just go in and have a PDF file out of an original design the way the thing is designed. The way I design stuff is in layers, and I have to go through this process the way I do it, the only way I know how to do it. And once I get that, I have to go and put all of these type of sheets together. And I'm using this in Keynote on a Mac to put each one of these sheets together to make a whole package of 12 sheets and instructions on the back and a cover sheet to make my design that I'm sending out. Hope that makes sense. But anyway, I've had a lot of people ask about Pattern Keeper. I know it works great for people. I don't know how many designers out there are actually using Pattern Keeper. I know I'm not. I know that Jules is. She does Pattern Keeper on hers the way she does her designs, but it doesn't work for me. Anyway, that's where we are this week. Showed you that picture. I don't have anything else, but anyway, I thought this was the first attempt, the guardhouse that I ever did, that I ever put out one of these pieces of paper. This piece of paper was caught. I made this in 1983. So how old is that? That's 83, 93, 100, 40 years old or something like that. So, and I still have some of them. I don't sell them anymore, but still have them. Okay, until next week, hopefully I'll be able to show you the snowbound and what I'm doing and making that ready for framing this week. I'm planning on getting the frame for that, the mat board, and hopefully I'll show you that and what colors I've decided to frame this. And once the framing process begins, I'm going to use not my Mac I'm sitting in front of now, but I'm going to use my phone camera to go down and show you how I'm cutting the mat board, how I'm putting it out, how I'm measuring it, and what I'm doing to put one of these pieces together. So anyway, until then, thank you all very, very much for coming back for another week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, next week, we're going to pick up a little bit more of how I got into the color booklets and where we went from there, and where I am and how I somewhat of how I got where I am today. But anyway, until then, thank you very, very much. And again, have a safe week. Bye.